Hello and good morning or good evening, wherever you are. You're very welcome to this session of Enterprise University. So we are now on to lesson 6 and we will be covering everything in relation to items. So what all the different types of items are, and of course all the different settings that you can apply to get up and running with using stock within the system. So let me just share with you where we are currently with the curriculum. And as always, this session is recorded live and of course will be made available today, later on today, of course, on our website, and that's enterpryze.com. And if you click on resources and into the university, you will get access to the recording. So you can play it back and re-educate yourself at your own pace and your own time. So let me start by sharing my screen with you. And if this is your first time to join, as always, you are very welcome. So just to remind you of where we are in relation to the current curriculum. So we have reached module 6. So we're over halfway through the current series for the Enterprise University. So we can see here we started off with CRM and sales, services, purchasing, accounting, banking, and now on to the first series of 3 in relation to the stock. So again, as I've confirmed, if you need access to previous recordings, do check those out on our website. So just to cover off what we're going to look at today, and obviously very simply, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to cover actually in this particular lesson, and hopefully you can stay up with me in terms of what we go through. But as I said, you can watch back the recording and remind and refresh your mind as to the different elements. So we get the items overview. So what are the different types of items? What can be defined and set up within the platform? Where these items impact your solution. So as you enter an item into the system, what happens next? What's the implication, for example, on your general ledger? So that's the accounting postings. What happens? What is the effect within the system? A detailed look, obviously, at all the different types of items and what they're used for and the value and benefit of having those different types of items defined in the system. Perpetual inventory. And I'll explain all of that once we come to it, because perpetual inventory is really how we value the stock that's going through the system. Setting up the enterprise for stock. So what does that mean? What does that cover off? So in terms of your item groups, your prices, your warehouses, and more, of course, because obviously we've got bin locations as well. I will also give you an insight into margin calculations. So what are the different margins that you can apply within the system? How do they work? How do you enable them? Can they be visible to everybody, or is there controls over who gets to see the information? So just how that's all utilized within the platform. Then we'll look deeper into one of the particular types of items, which is your bill of materials, and we'll look at how bill of materials can be defined, whether that's a single level BOM or whether that's a multi-level BOM. And we will also do a quick deep dive. Even part of the margin calculations I'll go in live into the system and show you how that's all set up. And then as we go through the setup of the bill of materials, batch items, I'll have also a live demonstration on adding those items into the system. So hold on to your seats. Lots to cover off, hoping that it'll bring you some value at the end of the day. It's always obviously key to point out that where the system stands today, as you know, it's forever evolving, and even based on the AGP webinar yesterday, so always getting better, that the system evolves very fast and moves forward at all times. And even when it comes to stock, we've even got a lot of stuff coming in place this year in particular. We've got a new item type, which is template items. So just to make you aware that it doesn't stand still, and obviously what we look at today will evolve again throughout the year. So just a quick recap just on what we looked at on the previous lesson 5, which was everything around the banking. So we looked at the bank feed overview and what that meant with being able to feed in your bank transactions into the system, how to set up bank accounts, adding the different types of payments, bank reconciliations, so whether that was from your bank feed or directly into your bank account. We looked at company reconciliations for clearing down your customers and suppliers, We also always address what the initial settings are required, such as payment terms, payment GL accounts, exchange rates, and then we did a demo on the bank integration. So watch back the recording and bring yourself up to date on everything around the banking module. And again, this is one that I mentioned during that particular lesson, that is also in the pipeline for up and coming changes this year as well. Okay, so let's kick off today's lesson and let's take a quick look at the items overview. So currently as it stands today, there are 5 different types of items in Enterprise. So of no surprise, of course, you have your regular stock items. So that's your physical stock that is counted and is stored and has a value on your balance sheet. We have non-stock items. They are not counted. They have no cost price or balance sheet value. And again, I'll go into all of these in greater detail. We've got bill of materials. So bill of materials are simply finished items made from raw materials, made up generally from stock items, but they can be non-stock items as well as part of the components. We've got dimensional items. So dimensional items such as squared items, such as box squared items, and then 3-dimensional as well. So that's where measurements in width and height are required, and they're variable as well to calculate, for example, square units. We've also got batch serial items. So this is where you can track items associated with batch numbers, for example, for perishable goods, food and beverage being a good example. As we all know, when we're buying something off the shelf in the supermarket, first thing I always check is the best before date, or, and of course, batch numbers are related to that particular expiry date, and that's important that if there's any problems with food or manufacturing or production on the line, they'll always refer back to the batch number. And of course, serial numbers for items that get shipped out with a serial number associated with that item. So that can all be tracked and audited as well within the system. So where do items impact in the solution? And I just brought this infographic in just to give you an idea of inventory being at the center of the platform, and really from there, what other aspects of what are the modules that in fact inventory would impact. But of course, inventory is huge. So every time you put through an inventory transaction, there is an impact somewhere. So in particular around the accounting module, what actually happens with the movement of the stock. So when you sell the item, it's going to be updating certain information, such as your revenue, such as the balance sheet, which is the actual stock account. The same, of course, when you procure or purchase that item. You've got quantities coming into stock, so receiving that into stock, and of course, then the movement of the balance as well, again, on the balance sheet. So lots of implications throughout the platform, and CRM, being able to track your leads and quotes around different stock items. And of course, then on your sales, committing that stock then to your customers through your sales orders, and then ultimately removing that or issuing that out of stock once that's been delivered to your customer. And of course, services as well for items under warranty, that you can link up your service calls to your items. So lots of different things that impact throughout the system, all in relation to your stock. And you can see there certain things around reporting, stock takes, bill of materials, your expiry dates, which is on your batch items and your serial items. So lots of implications around the entire platform. So let's just quickly dive into what all the different types of items are. So you can see here, obviously, stock items. It's generally a physical item that has a value. It can be stored, delivered direct to your customer, or used as raw materials. Stock items always have a cost price that is valued on the balance sheet. So this is what updates your stock account on the general ledger. They could have multiple prices and different currencies, and that applies, of course, to any of your stock items. They can be tracked, need to be tracked from order to sale. So from the time that the stock lands, coming in from purchase order to goods receipt, and then being issued on to sales order through to delivery, that it can be tracked all the way as on order and committed, and of course, ultimately received in and delivered to your customer. There may be multiple locations for storing. We will look at that as well as part of the setup, what that means in terms of your warehousing. The gross margin may fluctuate, absolutely, because again, depending on how the margins have been defined, and of course, if we're using perpetual inventory, so I'll introduce you to all of that now soon. There are other complexities that need to be managed as well, so lots of different elements within the system. If those items are on production, if items are, need to be reordered, so item reordering as well for reordering from your suppliers. So lots of different elements to be considered when managing items within the system. And of course, you could be dealing with multi-channel as well from a point of view of omni-channel selling. So you've got to look at where that stock is maintained, the different locations, and make sure that it's managed for all elements of your business. Non-stock items, obviously quite the opposite. They are generally a service or a labour item. They have no cost, so they're not valued on the balance sheet. They're not stocked or counted, so no stock taking, no in-hand, no free stock is relevant to the non-stock items. They can have, of course, different sales prices in different currencies, absolutely. They have a general ledger posting, so I'll show you that as well. They have defaults like descriptions. They simplify the billing of services, so that makes it easy then to simplify. So basically what you can do is you can define a series of service items so that they're automatically defaulted to certain GL account codes. And of course, ultimately, that's going to simplify the billing process. So whether that's the billing process on procurement or on the sales side. Bill of materials. So a little bit more complex when it comes to bill of materials. It's the component list of a finished item. And of course, it can be made up of the quantity of each item required. There can be cost of labour applied as well. So there can be manufacturing costs added to that particular bill of materials. The cost price of the components make up the finished item cost. Making a finished item depletes the stock, ultimately. So that depletes your raw materials or your components. There are multiple margin calculation methods available. Again, we'll go through all of these and what they are. Sales orders, well, this ultimately was what we used to do. Sales orders can be used productions orders and plan those in, but obviously we have the whole production module to plan everything in directly through production. BOMs can deplete from different warehouses. And of course, BOMs can be part of a multi-level BOM. So we'll go into that in full detail, and I'll show you an example of a BOM, and of course, what a multi-level BOM could look like from that as well. Dimensional items, what are they? Generally items that have a width and a height. So for example, squared items is one example. The width and the height derives the quantity of the squared calculation. So designed for items where that width and height is a variable. They can also be boxed square units with pieces per box, or square meters units per box. So a great example, of course, is a box of tiles. We all go into maybe in the January sales to go and do up the bathroom, and we're going to need a few boxes of tiles. And we've had the bathroom measured, and it comes up to maybe 4 or 5 square meters, and we need tiles to cover that surface area. You'll often find you walk away with maybe 3 full boxes of tiles and maybe half of another. So this is important, and this is how we can take care of that as a box square unit within the platform for selling those types of items where you're selling 3.5 boxes of, or it will give you the quantity of boxes in order to sell. So it's a really good and simple way of identifying the exact quantities required at the time. So again, designed for items where units is varied and stored in boxes that need to be split. So there's a great example with the box of tiles that we need to do up the bathroom. Also designed for 3-dimensional items. So where you have volumes assigned on sales documents. So for example, you go to sell the item, and of course now you've packaged the item. So the volume has increased, and depending on the packaging, so you need to come to the order or come to the sales invoice or come to the sales delivery and include the packaging as part of that dimensional item or part of the unit for that particular item. Now you can input the width and the height, which includes the packaging dimensions, for example, to get the true value at that point in time. Batch serial items. So just bear all this particular slide in mind when we look at the batch items for later on. So these are stock items that need to be tracked, obviously, in more detail. So typically tracked for warranty and expiry dates. So I gave a good example earlier on of where we said about food and beverage. So where you have items that have got an end of life and you want to ensure that the right information is tracked on them correctly at the time. So as you're receiving those items in, or perhaps you're in manufacturing and producing those items. So you want to make sure that you've got the right information recorded against the particular batch number so that as it's shipped out to your customer, you have full audit trail and traceability back to the source of the item itself. And of course, batch or serial items can be tracked through the production process, as I've mentioned there as well. So this, of course, helps with the rotation of the stock so that you can see as well on the batch reports for stock rotation exactly what has been sent out to your customers, and that, of course, that you've got the first in, first out. Really, that's where it will really, really help. So supports, of course, compliance and traceability. And I've mentioned already, will help with first in, first out of stock. So that's important. Always got, get rid of the oldest stock first, but it just ensure, of course, that that's obviously going out fresh as well at the time. So let's just focus in a little bit on stock items themselves. So we've mentioned that they're physical stock, they're counted and stored and have a value in your balance sheet. So what does that mean on the system about the stock that we have within the platform? So what I want to introduce you here to is the method of how we store stock within Enterprise. And that's used basically using perpetual inventory. And very, very simply, just in simple terms, what is perpetual inventory? It simply is an accounting method that continuously records inventory changes in real time on obviously a computerized system. So on a cloud platform, whatever system that you're utilizing for ERP to track that stock. That's what perpetual inventory is. So it continuously records the inventory. So as you receive in stock, remember the stock will have a cost price. That's going to implicate and update the stock value on the balance sheet. And when you issue that stock out to your customer at a sales price, that is also going to update the value on the balance sheet. So that's continuous, and that's what we mean by continuously recording the changes of the inventory in real time as and when they happen. So this, of course, reduces the need for physical inventory checks on a daily basis, for example. And that's because obviously physical inventory checks can become more periodical. So whether that's at the end of a month, the end of a quarter, or yearly, depending what your own processes are. So that kind of reduces the need because it's real time. So as soon as we issue those or receive in the goods receipts and issue delivery to our customer, we have the picture now today of exactly where we stand in relation to stock on hand, free stock, depending on if we have stock committed to our customers or stock on order from our suppliers. So we get to see the picture as of today. And that's the whole idea around perpetual inventory, making it simple. So it provides a highly detailed view of changes in inventory with immediate reporting. I've just mentioned that there, of the amount of inventory in stock, and reflects the level of goods on hand and updating the general ledger continuously. So just to give you an idea here of where the perpetual inventory kicks in relation to the general ledger. So when do the movements happen? When does my balance sheet get updated? When does my revenue get updated? At what point in time does it impact on the system? So as you can see here on the purchases and the sales, so there's two sides. So there's the value of the stock, but there's also the quantity of the stock. So when you put through a purchase request, nothing happens in relation to the value and nothing happens in relation to the quantity. We don't get an order from the supplier, not until we do a purchase order. In relation to our sales, it's exactly the same. Until we get to the sales order stage, we don't have a committed sales order quantity. So at both the order stage on the purchases and the sales, we get a quantity commitment. So an order from supplier and committed to our customer. Then when we go to delivery, so whether that's a purchase goods receipt which is a purchase delivery, or a sales delivery, that's when the movement of stock triggers the journals in the general ledger. That's when we start to see an update to the balance sheet. So for the movement of stock on the balance sheet, and of course, in relation to our P&L, our revenue, and our cost of sales. So you can see there from the goods receipt, if there was a goods return, an invoice, a credit note, they all have a stock implication depending on the timings and depending on when they were put into the system. Delivery, return, invoice, credit note, and of course reserve invoice on the sales side also have an implication on the stock movement in the general ledger. So just to give you a quick overview, these are the transactions, again, the ones that we just mentioned there on the previous slide, that have an implication for the general ledger. And I just wanted to give you an indication of what they do. So mentioned already, transaction, goods receipt, how it updates your general ledger. It posts to the goods receipt not invoiced, which is on your balance sheet, and the stock account, which is also on your balance sheet. So this is where stock has been received in, and it's now being recognized as waiting to be invoiced, hence the goods received not invoiced, which is the GRNI account here. But in terms of our actual inventory, it increases the stock quantity. So as you can see there with the goods return, reverses the above, and of course decreases the stock quantity. So we're returning stock to our supplier. Purchase invoice, again, takes the value from the goods received note, not invoice, and posts the supplier account. Now, if you skip the delivery stage, of course, the purchase invoice is going to do, it's not going to have the goods receipt, the gurney account. It's just going to be going directly to the stock valuation or the stock account. No change to stock unless the delivery is obviously skipped. So no change to stock unless it's skipped, or of course you change the quantity for whatever reason. Purchase credit note, the very same. So just giving you a quick overview of what happens when your purchase transactions are added in the system. Something very similar on our sales. So we've got our sales delivery, post the cost of goods sold to the P&L, and of course the stock account on the balance sheet. And of course sales delivery, stock is leaving the building. So of course it decreases your stock quantity. And the same so on for goods return, brings it back in, so increases the stock quantity and reverses the previous journal entry. Again, everything here that's mentioned is based on no changes in value, no changes in quantity, but of course there's implications. If you move from one document to another and change the quantity or change the price, you've obviously got additional journal line entries that potentially will get posted, such as the price variance or price difference. So you will have seen those potentially on an invoice potentially at some point or another. You can see there with a reserve invoice just at the very, very bottom, no stock change until the delivery stage of a reserve invoice. So the reserve invoice is slightly different. It's a bit like what you do on a sales order. It commits the stock, and it posts the revenue and the customer account at that point in time on the reserve invoice is added. However, the stock will not be decreased until delivery on the reserve invoice. So just to summarize all of that, just to bring it back to your mind. So in terms of the perpetual inventory, this is really where we automate the postings of the journals to the general ledger. That's what we're doing by utilizing perpetual inventory. This is all automation. It's real time. It happens at the point in time when you add those transactions. So just to confirm, on your purchases, on your sales, your purchase order, your sales order will commit the quantity. So purchase order for quantity on order from your supplier, and sales order for committed sales quantity to your customer. And from that point on, for goods receipt and delivery, that is where the direct effect on stock will occur, i.e. to increase or decrease stock, and of course to post the relevant amounts on the balance sheet for the stock account. So initial setup, lots of different things that you can set up before implementing the stock of the system. So we'll just kick off here with item groups, and of course everything else can follow as you go through it, but just to give you an overview of what all the different elements are. So when we look at item groups, and we'll also look at the postings for the item groups as well. Why do we use item groups? Well, we use item groups primarily to define items and manage those for the purpose of grouping them together for reporting on them, but also for the financial postings. So the item groups within Enterprise are utilized to define the general ledger postings, so that is the GL accounts required for posting to the general ledger. So I mentioned about your revenue account, your cost of sales account, your GR&I account, etc. They all have to be defined against your item groups. So if we have a look here, for example, you can see here that multiple items can exist within a single item group. Groups make it easy to set up new items. It just makes it easy to group them together and categorize them and manage them. It improves on reporting as well because all of our reports have the item group option. Automatically applies the relevant GL account codes, as I've said. So this is where it automates the general ledger postings for you, makes it easier to manage. So what do the general ledger postings look like? So let's just remind you here. So this is when you drill into an item group, what do I get to define? What do I get to assign and in terms of the GL account postings? So for example here, and again, this is all based on the fact that we're using perpetual inventory. So it simply automates those values going in and out of the balance sheet and of course the P&L. So you can see here the GL account is the first one there is the revenue account. That's the value that gets posted to there is the net of tax sales amount of sold. So that's the net value of what you sold to the customer will go to the revenue account. Cost of goods sold, that's the cost of the item based on the moving average. So that's the value, the cost of the value of that item at the time going to the cost of goods sold account. The expense, that's used for non-stock items on purchase invoices. Price difference variance, mentioned that already as well. So if you picked up on that is where we've obviously, between purchase documents, if there's a difference between, let's say, for example, you copy the goods receipt PO to a purchase invoice, but there's a price difference, there's a value change. So that will get updated to the price difference. We've also got a stock adjustment. So the cost of the item for the stock adjustments, we've got the sales credit, purchase credit. So obviously where there's a credit note, what revenue and what cost of sales account do you want to get updated? Are there specific ones that you need to track, for example, on your chart of accounts? So just giving you a quick overview on what each of those are. And of course, where are they housed? Very simply here in settings, module settings, you'll see there the item groups panel. And when you've defined the list of item groups, if you click on the button that says item group accounts, you will get this screen where you can then assign the GL account codes for each of the different groups that you have. And of course, if you've got multiple groups, save yourself some time. We've also got an option there to copy to other groups as well. So warehouses, let's moving on. So again, just another part of the initial setup. So warehouses and bin locations. So these are things that can be obviously added in. There's always a primary warehouse that's defined within the system. So when you first load up Enterprise, you will see that you will always have a general warehouse. So you can expand from that. Everything has to exist in one location to begin with. The nice thing here, of course, with warehouses is, again, multiple items can exist within different warehouses. So you can see here a good example. Item 1 and item 2 are in warehouse 1, but item 1 and item 2 are also in warehouse 2. So maybe you have different locations. Maybe one of your warehouses is a retail store. So don't forget, locations doesn't necessarily mean an actual warehouse. This could be your brick and mortar store. This could be the van. This could be different locations of where stock is being purchased and sold to and from. So the whole point of a warehouse, as I've said, is to segregate the stock across your physical locations. So I've mentioned there shops, buildings, vans, warehousing. Could be all your different omni-channel selling points as well, online stores, etc. Could be a location for that as well. It's to segregate stock based on status. So bulking, for picking, for returns as well. So of course this could align with if you're utilizing WMS, you might have a returns warehouse where you need to know there's a certain area where stock resides until it has been reviewed and then maybe it's back in for repair, or perhaps it has to be scrapped because it's broken or whatever needs to be done with that stock. So segregating it obviously does allow you to do this under the warehousing. For deliveries and service stock, for production stock. So again, you can add warehouses at any time in the future. So as your business model evolves and changes, you can add in warehouses at any time. And of course, through your item setup, then you can assign items to those warehouses as you go through. So where can warehouses help? So just a quick overview. So for stock taking, so you've got stock in different locations. I need to know exactly what's on the shelf. So I'm in my store, my brick and mortar store, and I need to know exactly what's on the shelf because I have the warehouse as well, but do I need to restock? Somebody's saying to me that I should have 20 there, but it's actually only showing 10. So if you need to do any quick stock checks, of course, you can do all of that by warehouse. Of course, you can run valuation to see what the value of stock is by warehouse. You can also control access to warehouses, so you can hide warehouses by user. Perhaps you don't want them to see return stock or where raw materials reside, for example. You can set up a warehouse as a drop ship. So that is where stock is not coming into your premises, it's going directly from the supplier to the customer. So a drop ship warehouse that can be just selected on the warehouse setup. You can set a default warehouse by user. So again, if there are certain users within the system that only have access to stock within certain warehouses, then you can tie that all the way down through the user settings as well. Or just make that their default warehouse so that every transaction that they put through defaults to that warehouse. Track stock en route from supplier, so on the water, so consignment stock. So lots of different things around warehousing for the purpose of storing, selling, buying, just knowing exactly where that stock is and tracking it all the way through. And very simply, to add a warehouse, again here in settings, into module settings, you'll see there the warehouses panel, and then you simply just come in to click on the plus button and you've got an ID, which is your warehouse code, a name. There is a button there for dropship or not. And of course, then you have what is the organization's default warehouse for stock. And that particularly that will apply, of course, for defining new items as they come into the system. Bin locations. So this is another way to store your items. So let's have a look at this visually, what a bin location means for a stock item. So a bin location really is an actual, so we're thinking of a warehouse. We're all familiar with the warehouse. And in fact, I'm sure we've all gone into Woodies, but I think more so, I'm thinking even of B&Q, and where you go in and see all the different shelves and rows. So you have all where the nails maybe are stored or the different tools are stored, and each of those all have different numbers as you go down through the aisle. So for example, going back to our items that we had, item 1 and item 2. So as we know, item 1 and item 2 can be in different warehouses. However, you will see here that item 1 in warehouse 1 can be in bin 001, but item 1 in warehouse 2 can be in bin 101. So what we do is the bins currently, as it stands today, the current bin setup is that you have one item and one bin. Okay, so a single item to a single bin. So it doesn't really matter what warehouse that bin is in, as long as that's still a single bin. So you can't have the same bin in 2 warehouses for the same item. So each item has to have a single bin within a warehouse or within a location. You can, of course, have linked bins. So for example, if you know that item 1 is always in bin 001, but you might have surplus of that particular stock and you might have it down the end of the aisle in bin 002, for example. That might be your linked bin then for item 1. So you can have it to say, well, look, this is the primary bin. There is a linked bin, so we know if somebody's going in to pick stock from that particular bin, that we do have a linked bin for maybe surplus stock of that particular item. So again, the whole idea around bins is to segregate stock within your physical location. So warehousing is obviously a really good example of that. So again, it's to segregate based on the status. So for bulk quantity, for picking, for returns. You might have a returns bin within the warehouse. You might have a picking bin within the warehouse as well. So, and again, the idea around the bins is to know exactly where to pick the stock from. For deliveries and service stock, for production stock, so it relates to all the different types of stock. And of course, you can add bins at any time in the future as well. So where do they help? Make picking and replenishing of stock a lot easier. You can create and import a list of bins for each warehouse. Each item can have one bin assigned per warehouse. Okay. Quantities are only held at item warehouse level, not at each bin. That's important. A linked bin feature that I mentioned already for items held across more than one bin per warehouse. Grid-based bin report. So we have a good bin report that shows you full visibility of where the stock resides within the warehouse. So what does adding bins look like? So very simply, again, we're in settings. We're in module settings. You've got a bins panel. And when you enable the bins and click on the plus sign, you will get this Wise panel where you can create the bins. So, for example, you might decide to create a bulk series of bins within that particular, so multi-bins. So that's just where you have, as you can see here, manufacturing warehouse. You might specify that you've got 20 bins in that warehouse, and you can define all of those in one go, or just if you want to just pop in one single bin into that warehouse, you can do so as well here. Okay, and you can see there, you also have an import option. So you can download the Excel template to make sure that that aligns with the information that you're going to import as bins into the system, and just make that easy then to bring the bins in. And of course, then you need to assign those then to your stock items. So moving on, we have price lists and price list setup. So what are price lists? Price lists really is how you record all the different potential selling prices or cost prices, the prices that normally apply to your suppliers and to your customers. And of course, those price lists can be based on currency. So you can hold prices in different currencies against all the different items as well. So you can see here that item 1, so again, just referring back to item 1, can be or can have a price on 6, for example, 6 different price lists. Price list 1 might be a regular sales retail price. Price list 2 might be a special sales price. Price list 3 might be a cost price, and so on and so on. And maybe they're different currencies as well. So it's important that you define what those price lists are going to look like. And of course, as you know, and this goes back to when we looked at the very first lesson on Enterprise, that you can assign a price list to a customer and a supplier, so they can have a default price list. So when that item is called up on a sales order, for example, and this particular customer is linked to price list 2, it'll be the price associated with that item on price list 2. So it makes it really simple then to set up and administer through the system. You can apply cost prices, as I've mentioned, different currencies. And of course, ultimately, the prices are used to track margins on products. So as you receive in your stock and input those prices, they'll be used to track margins as well on the products, because you can run a margin based on a price list as well. The price product can include tax, so B2C, or exclude B2B. So there is a tick box on your price list setup to include for the gross price or to exclude it, which is generally the normal setup. So that's where tax is added then at the time of inputting the transaction. You can show or hide prices by user. So for example, if there are certain price lists that you don't want all users to have access to, you can hide those by user as well. We mentioned about the defaults for your customers and suppliers. So very simply, where is this done? This is done through settings. Again, back into module settings. You have 2 panels. You can see them here: price list visibility and price lists. So the one on the right, price list, is where you define the lists of, or the price lists. So what you need to have defined as a price list. On the left, this is where you define if the price lists are visible, which is the default, visible to everyone, or you can edit that, and at user level, you can decide what price list that user will actually see. And maybe that's just to ensure that they don't sell at a particular special price, maybe for your sales employees, if you want to reduce that down as to what access they have within the system. So that's where you add them, and then that's where you see the visibility. So this brings us nicely on to the margin calculations. So I'm going to tell you about the different types of margins that we actually use within the system. So where does margin come into play? So you buy your stock item. So you buy that at a particular price or particular value. And of course, that's got a quantity as well as you receive it into stock. So now we start to create the margin. And of course, when we go to sell that, then what is the gross profit made at that point in time? So the margin is calculated based on the price you sell minus the price you buy. So this is the bit that probably everybody wasn't aware of. So there are two types of margin. We've got financial margin and sales. The financial margin is based on the moving average. Okay, so this is our perpetual inventory, moving average, always moving. So great example there. Last week you received in a quantity of 5 at €10. This week you receive in a quantity of 5 at €15. So of course your quantity in stock now is 10, but you'll also have a moving average price, which is the 10 divided. So the value then of the 5 by 10, which would be 50, and then the 5 by 15, and then divide that then by 10 in terms of the value to get a moving average cost price. That's your financial margin. So that's always moving based on the stock coming into the system. Sales margin, of course, obviously is very specific. This is based on the moving average. This can be based on moving average, last purchase price, actual cost, which is a manual based cost that you input onto your sales transactions, or to a specific price list. So that's your sales margin on your sales transactions. Both of those are very important because, of course, they have implications as to what cost price is brought in onto the transactions. That's something I will show you on a demonstration. Currency can also affect margin. Gross margin calculations can be enabled by user. They can be calculated by transaction and line level. And they can be calculated on the sale and on the make of stock, so the production of stock, or the make of a bill of material, for example. So different margin calculations. So we've mentioned those already. We've got moving average. So this takes the average cost of the current stock. So this is used in the general ledger and on sales transactions. Okay. Last purchase price takes the last price paid and applies it to the calculation used in sales calculations only. The actual or the manual cost price is based on entering an actual cost in the transaction, and that's your advanced entry on your line entry on a transaction and is used in sales calculations only. The price list margin takes the cost price from a defined price list and uses that in sales calculations only. The nice thing about the stock reports, and in fact it's something that we will touch on in the next lesson, is that you can run your stock valuation to any of these methods to see potentially what the value of stock would be at a price list or the last purchase price or at the actual cost price. So let's jump into the system really, really quickly there and just show you what this looks like, where you select the margin basis, where you can view the margin on the transactions, and ultimately view them on BOMs, because I did mention about making the final product as well for production, and where can you view the margin on those products. So let me quickly share my screen and we'll just jump over to the live system. And let me just share that with you. Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to show you here, this is where you can select the margins. So let me just move this out of your way. Okay. And if we come in here to settings, go in here to module settings, and if we look down here under sales and CRM, so this is the panel I'm currently on at the moment, sales and CRM, you will see here that there are certain options around the gross profit. So hide gross profit on grids. Do you want your users to see the gross profit on your sales grid? So you have an option here to select that and to hide it from view on the grids itself. Enable gross profit calculation. So that's enabled in this organization. So I'm going to be calculating gross profit on my sales transactions. What cost is used for the gross profit calculation? So this is the value that I mentioned. So we've got moving average, we've got last purchase, we've got actual, and we've got price list. I'm going to leave it at the moving average. And the next one here is display gross profit percentage as, well, how do you want that calculated? Do you want it on the basis of the profit? So that's the value between the sales and the moving average price divided by the sales price to get you the gross profit percentage. Or do you want it by the purchase price on your sales transactions? So that, of course, is going to be something that you have internally with your teams to decide from a financial perspective, what way do you want to see that on your sales transactions? So once that is all set, you very simply then come into your sales transactions. I'm going to obviously bring you to one I created earlier. Here is a sales order that I added, and what I want to show you here for this particular sales order, it's actually a manufacturing item, it's a bill of material item, and it's just for one quantity. And I can see just even on the line itself, this is just viewing the sales order at this point in time. No changes made. You can see the quantity. I can see the gross profit, which is the difference between the actual sales price. The sales price here is 150 and the moving average cost price. You can see there, I just brought that in to show it to you on screen. Remember that if you want to see this information, you simply use the columns feature to drag and drop that column to view so that you can see it on a transaction. So the base cost that's been used for the calculation of the gross profit is 104.08. So the difference between the two, of course, is 45.92, and then 45.92 divided by 150 is actually 0.306, and of course multiplied by 100. So not to be giving you a maths lesson, we all know how to do those types of calculations, but that's where it's coming from at line level. We also actually have visibility to the gross margin at transaction level. So if I have more than one line, and again, you'll have variable costs, you'll have different elements on the transaction itself. If I want to view the overall transaction margin itself, on the subtotal field here, can you see this down the bottom right? If I click into the value of the transaction, it will actually show me the total gross profit for that particular transaction. Remember, the purples are the clickables, and they're going to give you valuable information on your transaction or on your grid. So check those out when you're within a transaction. Now we've one transaction, so it clearly shows me exactly what the calculations are. If I had more than one line, or for example, if I had a discount allocated to the line as well, of course, it's going to vary the gross profit as well because you're reducing the net amount of the line for the purpose of the calculation itself. And because I used this particular item, the red bike, I'm going to go into items, and I'm just going to quickly show you that here. So I'm going to go into the red bike. So how do we then view, for example, for manufacturing items or bill of material items, to view the margins on those particular items? If I come in here to the red bike, and if I go to bill of materials, I have something similar here. We've got raw materials for cost price. And if I want to see the gross profit calculation, again, how do I view it? Do I view it using the moving average? Do I use it or the last purchase price or the price list? So if I say moving average, that takes the cost price of each of my components, which comes up to 90.76. Remember, one of these items, in case you're calculating it there on screen, one of these items has a quantity of 2. So don't forget to do that. So that comes up to 90.76. So where is the other 12 coming from? Well, that's very simple. We've also got a manufacturing cost on this particular item of 12. So that's also being considered as part of the overall margin or cost for this particular item. So you also always have to consider, what are the costs, what has been used in terms of, and let me just grab the cost price list as well, price list for the finished item. So that would be the last cost price that was used for this particular item, just to give us a gross profit calculation as well based on that particular price list. Or if I look at the sales price list, looking at the costs for that particular bill of materials and what that comes up to. So let me just go back and let's just focus in a little bit more around the bill of material items. So I'm going to look now directly at bill of materials. We have gone through what a bill of material item is. We saw this particular slide already. It's a component list of finished items. So just to refresh your mind before we go on to the next slide, that you can see exactly what the item relates to in terms of the batch or bill of materials. Because of course a bill of material item can be a batch or a serial item, and what actually happens when you make a finished item, it depletes the raw materials and brings the finished item into stock. So here is a nice simple example of a BOM, and we saw that there even on the red bike. So a bicycle, what does it contain? So this is our simple bill of material. So the components are the wheels, the frame, the handlebars, the saddle, the chain, a set of brakes. So there is all of our real raw materials. And then the bicycle is the actual finished item. And all of this can be stock items. Our components can be a combination of stock and non-stock, because of course they might contain labor, certain services, packaging, whatever happens at the point of production as well. So we can include all of that as part of our bill of material. But ultimately, the final bill of material or the final finished product itself will be always a stock item. What does it look like if this was a multi-level? Can we handle multi-level BOM? Yes, we can. So for example, as you can see here, BOM 1, so this might be just even part of your production process. BOM 1 is for the wheels and the frame, for the wheels and the frame to be brought together. Okay, so we might have BOM 1 that details just those two components. BOM 2 might be called bicycle step 1, that brings in the handlebars and the saddle. And then BOM 3 might be the next step that brings in the chain and the set of brakes. And then we have, of course, the finished item or the finished goods or the finished bike itself. We do have certain wise apps around looking at multi-level BOMs and exploding those out to see what requirements are and what sufficient stock may or may not be available for those particular bill of material items with our BOM exploder wise app. So if there's anything there that you're currently not utilizing to look at multi bill of materials even further, do check those out with support, and we can point you in the right direction. So managing a BOM. So we saw that margins can be calculated in multiple ways. BOMs can be smart apps, so that's what I've mentioned. Those wise apps can be used to import the bill of materials and configure them as well, or to see where we have sufficient or insufficient stock. Labor costs can be applied, we know that. So we saw the finished item cost is made up of the raw materials and the labor. We store a history of all the BOMs created. So we've got a production history as well, where those items are produced during production. We've got the MRP tool, so basically our advanced MRP, to replenish the stock and make sure we've no stock outages and ensure that items are basically replenished based on your required stock levels. So whether that's minimum stock, maximum stock, or to the reorder quantity, for example. Batches can be traced all the way through from raw materials through to the finished items. We've got a series of reports to track those and trace them. You can schedule a BOM, again, through production. And of course, we also have batch and serial items. So these can also be associated with a BOM item as well. So a BOM item can be batch tracked. So just to remind you here about batch and serial tracked, batch items are used to track expiry dates, relevant data, and very relevant for FIFO. So first in, first out stock. So when you buy the stock, you assign the batch number, and then of course you select the item then to sell it, or select the batch to sell. You can also, from the production side, when you buy, select the batch, make that item, select the batch and sell it on then to your customer. So batch tracked items can be for finished goods, can be for bill of material items, so just bringing it back to the BOM items as well. You can see what batch items of raw materials are in finished goods as well. And of course, it maximizes that stock for you. So always looking at what stock you can issue first out of the system. So creating your items. So let's dive into the live system while we still have a little bit of time left. And I'm just going to quickly just remind you of where the items are stored, how to create them, creating a BOM, creating and managing a batch item, just to give you a very, very quick overview. So let me just jump right in again to the live system and share that with you. So we see this one here. I mean, maybe just let's go straight to this, the red bike. So this is in fact a bill of material item. So if I am creating a bill of material item for the first time, so for example, what I could actually do here is I could simply just duplicate this particular item. We can call it the blue bike, it doesn't matter. And as you can see here, I'll just call it the blue bike, just so we can give it something different. And by duplicating it, what you can see here, the item group has automatically selected that particular group for bikes. Of course, I can click on the drop-down list here and categorize it somewhere else. But more importantly, the item type. So if I was creating an item from scratch, am I creating a stock item, a non-stock item, or a bill of material item? So we leave it as bill of material. We can also come down here to, if we come down here to the tab on the different price lists. So if we had multiple price lists defined, what is the cost or the price of that particular item? Maybe it costs us the same to buy that. So the cost price, I'm going to leave it here as 120. Sales price might be the same, but of course I can change that. So for example, this one might be slightly cheaper. Perhaps it's a different finish. And of course, the currency of that particular price list. So that's where you can see the variables then come into play on the actual price list itself. Moving across, then we have the reordering. Very important if we're utilizing the item reordering and purchasing or the MRP in production. So what is my minimum, maximum, and reorder quantities? If I have a default supplier, so this is to make sure that I order the stock from the right supplier at that time by utilizing the item reordering or the MRP. I can actually store as well company item codes. So this is based on a series of codes that are relevant to this particular supplier. So if you need to display those on your transactions, so who the company is, what the actual item code is in relation to the blue bike, so that you get to categorize or catalog those particular item codes coming from those, for those customers or coming from your suppliers. And of course, relevant taxes for selling, for purchasing, bill of materials. So these are your components. What components are required for this particular BOM item? What quantities are required? So you can see here, what warehouses do those raw materials reside in? So that's all important information. You can see here that we've got a plus button to add information on. You can see here on the manufacturing costs, I can add on additional costs if I so wish. If the item is applicable to other sales channels, we'll be able to do that through the items grid itself to assign those to the different sales channels. Any relevant attachments, perhaps there is a specification document for your product and you want to store that against the item. If you have any custom fields defined for your items, they can be populated here, and additional attributes. So these are the ones where the height, the length, the width, the weight. So the one I mentioned about the three-dimensional item for the weight. So this is where this information can be populated as well. Or for example, if we are doing landed costs, commodity code, country of origin for landed costs for particular items, that you can track and trace that information here as well. So let me just save that new bike. And maybe again, this is just around creating an item. What else can we do in terms of viewing that information? The great thing is here, once we've actually added a particular item, if we then want to manage an item, let me just go back to this grid here. This grid is super. This is your items grid. There's lots of different fields that you can bring into view on this particular grid. You can create a new item from here. You can search all. You can see there I've just got a filter on the bike at the moment. We can export to Excel. Did you know that if you select an item from here or multiple items, that you can automatically add those to a new sales order, or ultimately create a new bill of material from a selection of raw materials? So lots of quick actions that maybe you're not fully aware of that are within this particular grid as well to utilize even further. You've got filters, you've got actions. So for example, if you want to bring in more columns of relevant information onto view, that you can see that information here as well. You can see there for that particular item, I can see my moving average cost, so that 104.08 that we saw in the document. I can see what's available, I can see my price, so I can drill in to see the priceless prices as well for those items directly from the grid without having to drill in even further. So there's lots of information I get to hand on viewing that particular item. And of course, if it was batch and serial number, that I could actually see that it was selected as a batch or serial number and follow the information through. So lots there around creating BOMs, creating and managing your batch items, and of course, creating stock items within the system. Just another thing here, when I drill into the actual item itself, we did mention about warehouses and about bins. So I want to show you, where does that reside? Well, how do I specify what bin and what warehouse? So for example, in the warehouses tab here, you can see here, this is where I can select the bin against this particular item. So for example, if there is a bin code available, which in fact there isn't one here at the moment. So if I wanted to select an available bin or create a specific bin or display it as, that I can pick that up at this point in time on the basis of what I've already set or assigned through the settings. So I can assign my item to the bin here. And of course, there's lots of things, we'll learn that on the next lesson about transferring stock very quickly. And of course, if you want to make sure that this is the default bin or default warehouse for this particular item. And you can see here, I can also access the new warehouse option directly from the item setup. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to get educated and learn more about utilizing stock even further within the system. So what we'll cover off in the next module will be all around stock adjustments, what the adjustments look like in terms of receiving in or issuing stock, stock transfers, stock takes, stock valuations, reporting on items for traceability on BOMs and batches and serial numbers. Lots of things to know as well, tips and tricks, and going mobile and omni-channel selling, which I mentioned today as well. So as always, thank you so much for joining me. And if you need to find out anything further in relation to any of the universities that have happened to date, we have some ongoing blogs around those universities. It's enterpryze.com. Click on about us and then click on our blogs. And if you go in there to the Enterprise University, you will see we've got some really just key pieces, key takeaways on each of the lessons that have been delivered so far to date. Thank you so much as always for joining me, and I really look forward to seeing you on the next session. So thank you and take care.